Hello, you fine people. Thank you very much for joining me and watching the podcast. I'm not really sure what to call it, so we'll just call it the Maximum Effort Podcast for now. Not a lot, to be honest. There's studies showing that we can maintain our muscle mass with 1/9, I think, of the volume. There's been another study with 1/3 as well, but I'm sure there was one relatively recently with 1/9 of the training volume. Let's just go through the things that you need to have in any program to stimulate muscle maintenance and muscle growth. So, firstly, you have to have a sufficient amount of sets. The research has shown for most people that's somewhere between 10 and 20 sets per muscle group per week. So, that's 10 sets of quads across a 7-day week. But I've found that some people need lower. Some people get away with growth on 8 sets, so their maintenance is going to be a lot lower than that. So let's just say it's 6 sets per muscle group per week. Next, you need to be taking that muscle through a particular as best a range of motion you can, i.e. a squat or a lunge has to go as close to the ground as you can with a flat back, all the tension on the quads. And then after that, you have to look at your recovery. So if you're training hard, close to failure, which might mean higher reps if you don't have access to heavy barbells, then you need to recover. And that comes from having high protein, good sleep, good nutrition, minimal stress as best you can. But I don't think you will lose much. I think most people, especially the ones that are training with me, will at least maintain their muscle mass as long as they're training around, I would say, 3 times per week, and they're hitting each muscle group for at least 2 sets close to failure. And again, my clients will be doing that, so I've already spoken about this. But yeah, don't worry about it because it's harder to lose muscle than you think. And people that tell you otherwise are probably trying to sell you BCAAs, which are shit anyway, so don't eat them or drink them rather. Cool. Okay. This would be better if I had like a diagram. I don't have one, so I will. Let's keep it simple. So eccentric is when the weight is lowered down, i.e. in a squat when you're squatting down to the bottom, in a bench press when you're squatting when you're lowering the bar down to your chest. Anytime where the muscle is being loaded under stretch. So anytime the muscle is being stretched is the eccentric. The concentric is the opposite, and it's when you're pressing the muscle away. If in a pull-up, that's the concentric. So eccentric is stretching the muscle. Concentric is to contract the muscle. Negative is just a way of saying the lowering half. So it's the eccentric again. It's the lowering portion. Deficit is just putting yourself through a greater range of motion off the ground. So if you're doing a deadlift and you put, I don't know, a 2-inch block underneath your feet, and now you're doing a deficit deadlift because you're doing it lower than where you were previously. Deficit press-ups, for example, a press up to the ground, your chest touches the ground. If you put 2 blocks underneath your hands, now you get a bigger stretch on it. That's a deficit. Isolation is a weird one because no muscle works in isolation, but basically it refers usually to relatively easy and simple movements. So like a bicep curl would be called an isolation because it's a lot simpler to do than a pull-up. And this refers back to when I was talking about that people just think about moving the weight from A to B rather than the conscious effort to engage the muscle. But yeah, I don't really know which other ones. Oh, there's isometrics. That's holding the weight in one position and applying as much force as you can. Setting up a bench, for example, and you put 2 like bars across a section and you're pressing against them as hard as you can, so the muscle's held in place. Yeah, okay, that's pretty much all I can answer with that. Well, this one's actually really easy because we have really good research kind of talking about this. So the person's asking this because there is a thing called the interference effect. And the interference effect is when you are training for different types of results. So hypertrophy is making a muscle larger, is making it bigger in size, whereas endurance is making it capable of doing a task for a longer period of time. And there's two different muscle fibers. Technically there's three, but that's beyond the scope of this chat. There's two different muscle fibers you want to think about. You've got fast twitch muscle fibers, which grow bigger. They have a propensity to grow and can usually tire out more. And people have different makeups of muscle fibers. If you do an exercise and you notice that on squats, you get tired kind of doing 5 to 8 reps, you're probably more fast twitch, whereas in your quads, if you can do sets of 10 to 15 and you tend to see the best growth or the best strength increases there, you're probably more slow twitch. But fast twitch and slow twitch, basically slow twitch can go for longer. Fast twitch are more explosive. And that comes across when you see the elite. So runners, for example, Mo Farah, whilst being muscular and doing strength training, is trying to be as light as possible. So he doesn't want a lot of muscle. He wants to be more compact, whereas Usain Bolt wants to be as explosive and have enough muscle to help that explosive power. And he ends up looking a little bit more big and defined, I guess, than Mo Farah, who is still doing strength training, but it isn't as important for him to do hypertrophy. Now, how you marry them up is really simple. The best way to do it would be to do your cardio around 24 hours away from your strength training. And if you can't do that, do it 4 hours in between and have a carbohydrate-based meal to help you recover. And if you still can't do that, contrary to popular belief now, you would want to do your cardio before your training. I had a package come to the door. So we were just finishing up talking about how to incorporate cardio into a program. So just to reiterate, the most effective way to minimize any interference effect would be to do cardio around 24 hours before your training, your strength training that is. The next most effective way would be to do it 4 hours before your training, at least 4 hours. If you can do more, great. So cardio in the morning, strength training in the evening, with a carbohydrate-based meal in between there. And then I guess we'll call it the least effective, but for most people this isn't a huge concern. The least effective way, or the next most effective way, would be to do your cardio first. Now, I know a lot of the kind of scientists and kind of bros, I guess, in the past used to say do your cardio last because you'll tire out. But depending on if it's slow, steady state cardio, which is really low taxing. That's the point of cardio, was to be, or that type of cardio was to be low effort that's sustained along a long period of time. If you do that first, then your strength training, as long as your cardio hasn't impacted your ability to squat or lunge or whatever, then the body will adapt to the last adaptation placed on it. So if you run first, then strength train, your body remembers the strength training more than the cardio. So that would be the best way to do that, in my opinion. This leads on quite nicely and wasn't planned by me in the slightest. So, can running build muscle? So we've spoken a lot about the difference between muscular gain and kind of cardio gain and how to set that up. And it's all about signaling. Resistance training and cardio training is signaling. It's telling the body, you need to do this because I'm putting a stress on you. Now, steady state running and resistance training for the quads, glutes and hamstrings, let's just talk about them because that's what running hits as well. Running does not promote muscularity gain except in those that are the most untrained. So you might see it in very new beginners to the gym that they see some muscle growth just from running. But very quickly, you're talking maybe a matter of weeks, they stop seeing that response because the stress has now been adapted to, and the stress of running is no longer sufficient enough to signal muscle growth. Whereas for strength training, when you can squat, let's just take 5x5. So 5x5 is a program, you do 5x5 and you try to put a little bit more weight on like every other week. It's a pretty bog standard program and really has no kind of thought behind it except, this is enough to get you growing. Go do it until it doesn't work anymore. But the idea of resistance training is progressive overload, which is that training must get more difficult over time. Now that doesn't mean every week. That doesn't mean every week you need to be putting 1.25 kilos on the bar. It just means that when you train, it must be sufficiently difficult for that muscle to muscular failure. So not cardiovascular failure, you're not stopping doing a set of squats because your lungs are tired, you're stopping doing a set of squats because you physically can't extend your leg anymore, you can't stand up. That's muscular failure. So that's what you're looking for through resistance training to build muscle. For running, the changes come about in the hypertrophy of the heart and the lungs. They grow, but not the muscle, not the legs, because you're carrying yourself on your legs from the moment you can walk, right? So your body gets used to that very quickly. Now, could you put a vest on, like a weighted vest, and go running? Yeah, probably, but just go do a fucking set of lunges would be my best advice. So to round that off, there are two different signals. There's cardio signaling and there's resistance training signaling, and they create different adaptations. Running will not create those adaptations that you want. It will help you up your activity, which could help you if you're in a calorie surplus to look leaner, but it doesn't necessarily make you more muscular. As much as you want and as much as you can recover from. So if you can recover from 6 days of training and you want to train 6 days a week, cool. If you only want to train twice a week and you can only recover from twice a week training, cool. There's people that train. This answer is the standard wanky PT answer, which is it depends, unfortunately. But basically, if you had all the time in the world, which I guess people do now, if you're furloughed, is that you want to probably hit the muscles a minimum of twice a week, and you want to pay attention to your recovery. So if you say I'm going to train legs, I'm going to train lower body 4 times a week, but you train on Monday and you're so sore that you don't recover to be able to train again until Friday, then you need to either look at splitting your volume up, so doing less sets in that session and move across the different sessions, or you have to look at how's your sleep and nutrition. If that's all good, then your quads can only be trained twice a week. This is very individual, but basically it boils down to, can you give your muscles a sufficient stimulus where they feel tired and fatigued, but they are able to recover in 2 to 3 days so that you can perform again? Because ideally, in the perfect world, more volume is better when you can recover from it. But my advice for most folk is to train each muscle group twice a week and go probably 2 reps from failure, and that's another conversation entirely. How close to failure are you actually? But to make it easy, hit each muscle twice a week with 10 sets per week. If you find that you've got more time to train, then you can do more sets and get a little bit more out of it. Time-wise per day, there is some research, not that I've gone into it super deep, to suggest that there's times where you peak around midday, but to be honest, it seems just to be a bit wishy-washy and is more hassle than it's worth, in my opinion. But that's up to you. Personally, train when you feel best and when you've got the most energy, and leave it at that. Excuse me. First thing I would look at is, why are you going to the gym? What are you getting out of the gym that you need to be going so frequently? Because often a lot of people hit the gym so hard because they believe that that's the result of fat loss and health, when that's not really true. There's plenty of healthy people and thin and like people that are of a safe body weight that do not train. Um, if you consistently miss a session or an exercise, which I have done before, you need to sit down and look at your goals and look at your why. Why are you missing that exercise? Is it because you don't like it? Is it because it doesn't feel good? Is it because it hurts your back? Look at your sessions. What's your time management like? Do you have time? There was like a time in my life where I could only make 2 training sessions a week, but I consistently tried to make 4 and I just felt like shit because of it. Whereas when you sit down and you say, okay, here's the time I have available to train per week, and what can I get in through those exercises, then you start to see, oh, actually, I thought I want to train 4 times a week, but with my work schedule, I can only train this many times a week. And to go on to your point about feeling like you've just undone your work, well, if you listen to the earlier part of the podcast, you're gonna hear that you have a lot of leeway when it comes to muscle loss, i.e. that you could not train for 2 to 3 weeks and see no difference. You could train with a third of the volume you normally do. So if you normally do 10 sets or 9 sets and now you do 3 sets a week, as long as they're sufficiently stimulating enough, you will maintain your muscle. So it's about understanding what goes into the back end of training. And if you miss 1 set of crunches, it's not the end of the world, because it's not an on off switch. It's not, oh, you hit 4 sets last week, only 3 sets this week, so you won't gain muscle, you won't maintain it. It's just not as black as white in that, unfortunately. Pardon me. Journaling would be a really important one for me. I think if you are really struggling with this, I would write down the issues, so gym routine addiction, fear of missing a session or exercise, and then feeling like you've undone all your work, and write down, how do you know that you've undone all your work? How do you know that has happened as a result? And then if you don't know, okay, you can find out, you can ask questions, but ultimately I can tell you've not undone your work. It doesn't matter if on occasion you're missing a session or an exercise, but you still won't feel any better until you understand why that makes you feel that way. So you need to sit down and go through that a little bit more. And if you need to, you can message me, because I think I know who this is, but just in case it's not them, feel free to message me on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, however you get in touch with me. This is tough, and I know a lot of my clients have been struggling with this. You only stick to things and you only stick to routines when you have a strong why. Why do I get up in the morning? Why do I brush my teeth? Why do I go to work every day? Why? So the first one, I want to go backwards with this and hit up the I end up eating out of boredom knowing I'll gain weight, yet struggle to break out of a who cares mentality. Well, firstly, you need to care, because weight gain isn't the worst thing in the world as long as it doesn't impact your health. So I want you to stop thinking about it like, who cares? Because let's go to the extremes of weight gain, and it gives you diabetes or any number of weight related issues, like you have a stroke or a heart attack because your arteries are blocked from the fat. Well, you should care about your health. And health can occur at a number of body weights. So I would say that when I focus on fueling myself with the right foods, and minimizing snacking, It's because I have goals in levels of fitness that I need to maintain for my own self confidence and my own values, and that's what helps me. And if I have something, and if I have a rough couple of weeks and I do overeat a little bit, I don't beat myself up for it. Instead, I try to understand why and then move on and learn from it. Now, an action for this one is to try and create some form of cheat sheet. And now the cheat sheet is simply when I get bored or have an emotional response to a situation and I want to eat, instead I will do A, B, C, or D. And I've got a post on this on Instagram that you can look up. I think it's one of the last 5 posts I put up, or maybe one of the last 6. But you need to set up some form of if-then statement or try to build a new habit in that is underpinned by why this is important to you. So I would sit down, write down, again, just like the previous question, it's a mindset, so it makes sense why we're talking about similar things. Write down the issues, write down how they take you further away from your goals, and if your goal is just to be healthy, to be alive, then write down health. And then once you understand, right, this is doing me wrong. Let's say wrong. I don't like using wrong or good and bad because things aren't as black and white as that. But this is potentially harming me. Here's a list of things that I'm going to do instead. And it's about consistency. So some days it might be getting up and going a 10k run and then doing an upper body workout. And then some days it's just not having an extra slice of cake. And you have to be able to take those small wins when they occur. That's a big thing for me. Take the small wins when they occur. With having nobody to keep you company during the day, it's difficult. I've advised my clients to kind of find things that they'd always said they wanted to do but never had the time for, permitting that it's obviously within the lockdown rules, but to develop their own projects, to sit down and just write for a couple of hours what they want to get done through that project, why it's important to them, and then we can start to set up a daily schedule. Ultimately, my answer to this is that the habits that you're building up right now, and let's call them ineffective habits or bad, the habits that you're building up right now will not affect you in the short term, but they're habits that are going to affect you in 5 years' time when you're out of lockdown and we're back to real life. So you have to consider that these actions right now may not have consequences in the immediate sense, but they'll have great consequences in the longer sense. And I really want you to just think about that. One thing for me was I was a prolific weed smoker when I was younger, and that has been something that I have struggled to get rid of and stop doing and well into my adult life, and it's really, really difficult. And it is the result of a habit that I built up when I was 17 that when I'm approaching 26 is still something I deal with. So think about how this is going to affect you in 5 years' time, and then you can come up with small plans and small victories to help you. And again, if I can help within the purview of my role as a PT, please get in touch with me. And one more that I'm going to cover, because the other ones I will cover in a video, is firstly, look at the distractions that are plaguing you and get rid of them, or put them away. Set up a time management schedule so that you are dedicating at least 1 hour a day to your work to make sure that you are getting something done, and then slowly build that small win up, and start to build a habit out of it. Distractions are because you don't have clarity on why you're doing things. So why are you really wanting to do something? Why do you want to Why are you doing the work you're doing? Why are you potentially, I don't know where I was going with that one, but why are you doing what you're doing? Why is it important to you? And then when you have clarity over that, it helps to understand why you're doing it and develop the time. And then you take physical action to remove the distractions away from you. Being overwhelmed by loneliness is a hard one, because it's okay to be lonely during this. It's not a bad thing to feel lonely, but this could be great for you, because being good with your own company is one of the best things you can do. Realizing that you don't need anybody except you can be a massive thing. And what I would do, because being a PT can be quite a lonely profession, what I do to help myself not feel that overwhelming sense of loneliness is I'm pursuing projects, and I'm pursuing a career, pursuing a dream of mine that would not be possible if I was a super social creature. I have my close friends, and I stay in touch with them, and one thing I do when calling folk or being in touch with people is that I don't have generic conversations. I try really hard to be present with them, and I try really hard to pick an activity for us to do over the phone, whether or over PlayStation or over Zoom, that we can experience together. And I think what you're maybe struggling with is that you're not experiencing things, you're just existing. And existing is just living till you die. Whereas experiencing things, and that could be watching movies on your own, watching foreign films, learning how to speak another language, all these things, as long as you have a clear why around them and why they'll benefit you and why you want to do them, can be so good for developing your ability to be within your own company. And it's probably more important now than ever, because we don't know how long this is going to go on for. So if you're struggling with it, I would say looking into ways of experiencing and enjoying your own company is a big thing. Secondly, being able to call people, make a plan with them just like you would during non-quarantine times. If you're going to watch a movie together via Zoom, read a book together and discuss it, and try to be present and experience life as best you can. That's all I can offer from my own point of view. I can't really speak from a psychological point of view, because I feel like it'd be out of my scope of practice. But I think that's the best advice I can give you on that one. I hope it helps. Really quickly, there's two other questions that I'm just going to quickly go over. Exercises to strengthen the wrists, please. It's probably because you're doing press ups and they're like this. You're normally used to doing like bench press, dumbbell presses like this, where the wrist is stacked on top. Having this flex back is really uncomfortable. Limiting the amount of extension of the wrist, and being able to maybe put yourself, like if you've got a surface or if you've got dumbbells, and you can bring yourself into that more neutral alignment rather than the extended position, would be key for me. But wrist strengthening exercises, I'm going to do a video on these because I presume this is someone that's in one of my PT sessions or groups. I'm going to pop a video in the Facebook group on this, and probably on Instagram as well, so watch out for that. Compensate loss of muscle during this time. Your body weight might be dropping because you're eating less, because you're not hungry. You might be eating less carbohydrates, but chances are you're not losing muscle mass, especially if you've been training close to failure and you're experiencing fatigue in the muscles and a little bit of DOMS. So don't stress it. Eat enough protein, around 1.6 grams per kilogram, closer to 2 if you can. Train hard, and try to be the least amount of stress as you can, or experience the least amount of stress as you can, and you'll be good. I promise you. Honestly, it's all in your head. I really promise you will not be losing muscle mass if I think who it is, which I think it is. If your name begins with an E and ends with an A, and you ask that question, I don't think you're going to be losing any muscle. Thank you so much for watching this, however much of it you watched, however much of it you listened to. I will try to get the stamp times down for the questions that I answered when I answered them, so you can go to your own specific one. If you have any feedback, I would love if you could put it below. That really helps me make this better and make it more beneficial for you. If you want to ask questions, I'll link the podcast form below. And apart from that, thank you very much and have a wonderful weekend or week, wherever you're watching this.